In a small coastal town named Glistening Shores, life meandered like the sluggish waves that lapped against the sand. It was a place where days bled into nights, and the tide never truly bothered to bring in anything new. The inhabitants moved through their routines with a resigned acceptance, as though tethered by invisible strings to the monotony of their existence. At the heart of Glistening Shores stood a weathered lighthouse, its light flickering half-heartedly in the face of an encroaching fog. The lighthouse keeper, Mr. Simon Weathers, had watched over it for nearly 4 decades. His existence was a dance with the absurd, though he would never have named it as such. Each day, Simon climbed the spiraling staircase to the top, cleaned the lantern room, and ensured the light worked, despite the fog that seemed impervious to its glow. Simon had long since stopped questioning the purpose of his duty. After all, questioning seemed to yield nothing but a headache and a deeper sense of futility. Instead, he embraced the repetitive tasks, finding a strange comfort in their predictability. To question the lighthouse's purpose would be to question his own, and that was a path he dared not tread. Across the cobblestone street from the lighthouse lived Nora, a young woman who had recently moved to Glistening Shores in search of peace, or perhaps an escape. Nora's life in the bustling city had felt like a cacophony of meaningless activities. The noise, the rush, the constant demand for purpose. It had all driven her to the brink. She sought solace in the quiet town, believing that here she might find some semblance of meaning. Nora soon fell into the rhythms of Glistening Shores, though she couldn't shake the gnawing feeling of absurdity that clung to her every action. Each morning she would walk along the beach, collecting seashells with no particular end in mind. She had amassed quite a collection, yet it only served to deepen her sense of purposelessness. Why did she collect them? What did it matter if they lay scattered along the shore or neatly arranged in her tiny cottage? One particularly foggy afternoon, Nora decided to visit the lighthouse. She had seen the old man who tended to it, his figure always outlined against the swirling mist, and her curiosity was piqued. As she approached, she noticed how the light struggled to pierce through the fog, casting ghostly shadows on the ground. "Hello there," Nora called out as she reached the base of the lighthouse. "Do you mind if I come up?" Simon, startled by the intrusion, peered down the spiral staircase. It had been years since anyone had shown an interest in the lighthouse, and he wasn't entirely sure how to respond. Sure, come on up," he finally managed, his voice echoing in the empty space. Nora climbed the stairs, her footsteps echoing alongside his voice. When she reached the top, she found Simon meticulously polishing the lens of the lantern. He glanced at her, his eyes reflecting the same foggy haze that enveloped the town. "Do you find it meaningful?" Nora asked, skipping the pleasantries. Simon paused, the cloth in his hand hovering over the glass. "Meaningful?" he echoed. "I'm not sure that's the right question." "What do you mean?" Nora pressed, genuinely curious. "Well," Simon began, "I used to think about that a lot, whether what I did here had any real purpose. But after a while I realized that the question itself is kind of pointless. I mean, does it matter if it's meaningful? The light shines, the fog rolls in, the tide goes out and comes back again. It just is." Nora frowned. "But don't you want it to mean something?" Simon shrugged. "Wanting doesn't change much, does it? We keep doing what we do, regardless of whether it means anything. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the absurdity of it all is the only meaning there is." Nora sat on a nearby bench, letting his words sink in. She thought about her seashells, her walks on the beach, and the endless search for something that might not even exist. In Simon's acceptance of absurdity, she found a strange kind of liberation. Perhaps meaning wasn't something to be found, but something to be lived, even if it seemed absurd. Over the following weeks, Nora and Simon struck up an unlikely friendship. They would often sit together at the top of the lighthouse, watching as the light struggled against the encroaching fog. Nora continued her walks along the beach, but now she did so without the heavy burden of expectation. She collected seashells, not because she sought meaning in them, but because she enjoyed the act itself. One day, as they sat in their usual spot, Simon turned to Nora. "You know, I think there's a kind of beauty in the absurdity of it all." Nora smiled, feeling a warmth she hadn't felt in a long time. "I think you're right," she replied. "Maybe that's what we've been missing all along. The beauty in just being, without needing it to mean something." As the fog rolled in once more, the light of the lighthouse flickered steadfastly, casting its pale glow over glistening shores. In that moment, surrounded by the embrace of the absurd, Nora and Simon found a sense of peace. They understood that life's meaning wasn't something to be discovered or achieved, but something to be experienced, even if it seemed absurd. And so, in the small town of Glistening Shores, amidst the endless fog and the ceaseless tide, two souls embraced the beauty of their existence, finding meaning in the very act of living.